So I love BioShock Infinite. What does that mean, though? That's a great question. BioShock Infinite was something pretty special to me back when it released in 2013. It's the same year the new consoles came out. It's the same year The Last of Us came out. And I think I still, even playing The Last of Us Remastered just recently, I still enjoy and adore BioShock Infinite more. I probably still list this game in probably top five, certainly like top 10 favorite games of all time. But just thinking about what it improves on from not only just the original Bioshock release, but just how fleshed out Columbia and the voxophones and just kind of a lot of aspects of this game, how all of that just comes together, really creates just like a special, pretty great experience, I'd say, in the end. But yeah, this is the post game. Thanks for tuning in. I have finished BioShock Infinite again for the first time since 2013. I did platinum the game back in 2013, and you better believe I just platinumed the game yet again here in 2020. I ended up buying the BioShock collection when it came out on PS4. I played the first and second, platinum those again. But then I was always just holding off on BioShock Infinite until like a really good time that I wanted to get back in and platinum that game or play that game again. And finally did that just recently when it was free on PlayStation Plus. So just some things I want to talk about. I kind of just highlighted like three main things. It was mainly just Columbia, the gameplay, and then the story. So kind of just to start off with Columbia, I mean, I love Rapture. I think that aesthetic is fantastic. I think Rapture was definitely its own character in the original BioShock and probably the best part of that game. But I think I love Columbia more. I love that kind of old, early 1900, early 1900, late 1800 look of just how things are painted, how things are drawn, like the art. Just even like kind of down to like the fashion, what people wear back then. It's just some of my favorite stuff to not only look at in video games, but certainly like other kinds of media, like TV, movies, art, whatever kind of art, comic books, whatever. I always love looking at that. It's kind of like, what you'll probably see on the channel also are like some baseball card openings. And coming up soon, I might have like a video on like Allen and Ginter, which is a baseball card tops series that like really kind of has that late 19th century early 20th century kind of look to it. So just pretty excited that Columbia really capitalized on that look, and it's just fantastic. There's a lot of different areas you go to, but the big one I wanted to really mention was Battleship Bay. It's probably the one you spend the least amount of time in, but I think overall it's probably my favorite place. And there will be some spoilers towards the end of this. But Battleship Bay is right after the monument place where Elizabeth is held, crashes down and gets destroyed. There really isn't much that happens in Battleship Bay, but I even have like a t-shirt that I bought like off the Irrational Games store. I think maybe that's still up. Probably not, because Irrational Games is not a thing anymore. But just really happy to see that place. It's kind of, when the world is still bright and cheery. It hasn't been completely destroyed yet. Kind of like we're towards the end of the game. Columbia really just starts getting ripped apart. And I feel like it's less and less appealing to look at, where I thought the more Rapture was getting destroyed, I thought the more appealing it began to look at. So if that's like a little bit of a criticism, I'd say that might be one. But Columbia, and it kind of ties into the story a little bit, but like when you first see Columbia for the first time, when you like ascend from the lighthouse into the clouds, just the music, I think it's like maybe the Welcome to Rapture song. I can't remember what it is. But just seeing everything in flight, seeing everything in motion, the blue sky, the white clouds, just how colorful everything is. I think to me, that's what makes it stand out a little bit more than Rapture, because we do get to see Rapture before the fall in Burial at Sea, which I'd also like to do a video on here in a little bit, which is the DLC for BioShock Infinite. I think specifically uh, seeing Columbia before it is fallen, like in a, a wide sense, like you're doing fighting, you're shooting, you're having story elements that are happening as Columbia falls while it was, still at its prosperous time. Whereas in BioShock, the original, you literally showed up when everything was already destroyed. So, really enjoy those sorts of things about Columbia the most, and just about BioShock Infinite. So kind of just to touch on a little bit of the gameplay. I feel like the Vigors aren't really as memorable as the Plasmids in the original. So the two that I highlighted here was Charge and Return to Sender. I really didn't use those at all, and I don't think really anybody else used them. Charge is actually kind of a necessity on 1999 mode, which is the hardest difficulty. To get through, especially like the Siren boss fights, like towards the end of the game, there's a upgrade to Charge where you have like invulnerability, or your shield automatically recharges after you hit somebody. That you have to basically have that ability to even stand a chance in some of those fights. But yeah, other than that, I never used Charge. Like, you get it and you're just like, why would I ever want to use this? I feel like a lot of the other Plasmids from the original were much more, let's say, appealing to use. I guess I'll put it that way. There is gear. It's back, which I say it's back because it's literally just the tonics from the original BioShock. You don't have to go to a vending machine to change them. You can actually just change them on the fly in the menu at any time in BioShock Infinite. I don't really have too much to say about that. If you're playing on an easier difficulty, even when I was playing on normal, the first time, I didn't pay any attention really to what gear I had on. I just kind of ran through, shot people, and used my Vigors. So it really wasn't much of a big thing to me, but especially, in 1999 mode, you got to pay attention to what you're using. So I guess that's really where those kind of systems shine. Kind of a funny moment. So, of course, the original BioShock had a weapon wheel, and BioShock 2 as well. I think it was actually in Battleship Bay where you have one of the fights. I originally had the pistol, and I had maybe the shotgun. It was that or the machine gun, whichever one. And I had both of those weapons, and I was like, oh, okay, I've got those two. And I ended up shooting another guy, and I was like, okay, well, now I'm going to go pick up the shotgun or machine gun, whatever it was. And then I'm like, he dropped it. And I was like, oh, well, maybe that was something weird. And I tried holding R1 to be like, okay, well, I want to select the shot. Oh my, this is a 2-weapon game. I completely forgot about that. I completely forgot about it. It was probably the most oh right moments in this game. So R1 doesn't really do anything. R1 just switches between the weapon you have and your previous weapon. But holding the button does absolutely nothing. So you do have a 2-weapon system where you have to, basically means you can't carry all the weapons. You have to you have to decide what you want to keep. So it's more in line with something like Call of Duty, where you can only hold this weapon or that weapon at a time. You can't hold, 6 weapons or whatever, 10 weapons that, the original in BioShock 2 had. Where you do have a weapon wheel kind of on the Plasmid front. So you can kind of select what Devil's Kiss or Shock Jockey. You can actually decide what you want to hold in that instance. But nope, not on the bullet shooting weapons, unfortunately. And kind of talk about those weapons. It's a standard shooter. It's a much more... People talk about Metroid Prime being a first-person adventure game. I would call the original BioShock, I would call very close to first-person adventure game. Whereas I feel BioShock Infinite is more of a shooter. You have Carbine, machine gun. Those are pretty much my go-tos. You have your rocket launcher. You have your 3-round burst. You have your single shot kind of guns. Those are the guns you mostly find in other shooters. You're not getting anything crazy or inventive in this game. Where I feel you had maybe a little bit more variety in the original. You also don't have a stand, where to melee in the first game, you had to have a wrench, where you actually see that model of the wrench at several points. in the game. You don't actually get to pick it up and use it. Elizabeth actually uses it on you at one point, which is actually kind of funny. But you do have the skyhook melee. You can do like executions and stuff like that on. That's mapped to triangle, so you can just smack people around. It's kind of a necessity on 1999 mode, where there's different vulnerability and different buffs that you get if you melee or execute certain people. The vigors. So I talked about them a little bit, that they weren't like as memorable. There are some memorable ones though. Murderer Crows is kind of like the bees plasmid or vigor from the original. Shock Jockey is basically like Electrobolt. But I like that there's ways to combo them a little bit better. So like if you throw out Murder of Crows and you use Shock Jockey, you could have just like electrified ravens flying around, or electrified crows flying around, and it'll shock other people too. So I like the combinations. They don't really have that big of an emphasis in the game, but I like that that's available. Undertow is pretty cool. Specifically, you can just like push people off Columbia. It's more of like just like a shot of like, I guess it's like water or something like that. It kind of clears out wide range of enemies pretty fast. And then probably my favorite is Bucking Bronco, where that kind of like shoves everybody up in the air. That like you can't. I think it's the only plasma in the game you can't technically kill with, or even like possession you can get a kill because you do like the suicide thing for those enemies. But Bucking Bronco, it's a non-lethal plasmid, but you can use it a lot. It doesn't take very many salts to use, where you can just constantly just pile. Like where it's kind of like a hey, I can use Bucking Bronco on this guy. That kind of gets him out of the fight for a little bit. Now I'm going to focus my attention on somebody else. Or you can just capitalize on those person flying in the air and just completely just rain hellfire on them. I didn't tend to use the tears very much. So the tears are what Elizabeth has, that she can pull out certain items from other worlds. I didn't use them very much, as I probably should have. Again, going back to 1999 mode, you pretty much have to use them, either be for cover or, using like different turrets to like get a hold of, which is kind of like, pro strats. If you use a tear on a like turret, it's probably going to die. Like if you're on like 1999 mode, it's probably going to get destroyed in like literally like less than 5 seconds. But one, it's a good distraction. But two, if you go and do like a tear on like a skyhook or something like that, that tear of the turret will reload in like 5 seconds. So then you can go immediately right back and open up the tear to the turret again, which then also tries to shoot some people and then also creates another distraction. So if you're still trying to fight through 1999 mode, I kind of have that little bit of a tip for you. But yeah, there isn't really much for the tears. Like they offer like different salts, they offer different skyhooks, they offer different weapons that you can jump in, or even health packs. They're neat to use, but if you're just playing this game on normal or easy, you really don't have to use them. And talking about skyhooks, you do have the sky lines, which I really enjoyed. Those were like one of the first things you saw from like the original footage of BioShock Infinite when they first showed it. It can make for dynamic combat and some pretty quick escapes, where you can just go flying around places. You can do skyline strikes. You can shoot from the skylines. I think there's a trophy for like 5 headshots or something like that while on a skyline, which is doable. You can slow down and speed up. But skylines it was a nice addition from the original BioShock kind of flair. And in the story and in Columbia, skylines are, how like cargo transfers from like one area of Columbia to the other. And you have these skyhooks that is also your melee weapon, but you can also ride around on them, which is neat. I think there's like replicas of skyhooks out there, which I think would be really cool to get one at some point, but I'm sure those cost a pretty penny, or a pretty silver dollar, as it were, in BioShock Infinite land. The last thing I just wanted to say about the gameplay, I did platinum the game again on PS4. That makes 6 total BioShock platinums for me. Yay. I'm a trophy whore. 1999 mode really isn't that tough, as long as you're scavenging the environment and getting infusions and gear. If you know where those things are at, The only thing that's going to be a tough part for you is maybe a couple fights with the handyman and the sirens, which I really had to use a guide for. I will admit I had to use a guide for the sirens because if you die on 1999 mode, not only do you lose $100, but all of the enemies that you were fighting completely go back to full health. So if you almost beat the siren and then died and then like got revived by Elizabeth, you would have to fight the siren with less ammo and less salts from the very beginning again at that point, which is like, what's the point? Just reload your checkpoint or reload your most recent save. And yeah, like, I mean, you're mowing down a ton of enemies in this game. A lot. Like, you're mowing down so many more Vox Populi or, Columbia agents, I guess, let's say, compared to how many, like, splicers you had to take down in the original BioShock. So yeah, you're shooting a lot of people. That's for sure. But then going into just kind of the final point, don't have a ton here, but just talking about the story. I mean, just Elizabeth and Booker. This is really highlights the game for me, and just where The Last of Us did really well highlighting Joel and Ellie. I think something that was missing was like the world itself being a character, where I feel like the relationship between Elizabeth and Booker, and then on top of that, in the backdrop of the world of Columbia, made that story just a little more, it resonated more with me, I guess, let's say. And not to say that The Last of Us is not a perfect like 10 out of 10 game, because it is very, very close. I would almost say The Last of Us is a better game, but I just liked BioShock Infinite more and just its aesthetics. And you can probably write that it's unfair to compare those two, which I absolutely agree. But the only reason I compare them to is because they came out months apart back in 2013. And, where a lot of people loved games like Grand Theft Auto 5 came out that year and loved The Last of Us, I was kind of that person being like, I don't know, I kind of really believe BioShock Infinite was my favorite game of that year. You do meet several characters that I wish we would have gotten more out of, like Cornelia Slate, Daisy Fitzroy. Cornelia Slate knew Booker back during like the Boxer Rebellion. I wish we would have gotten more out of him. He really, you could take Cornelia Slate out of this game and there's really no consequence at all. Like, there's really no point for him to be in the game, rather than be like, okay, this is just like a side thing we're going after now. Whereas Daisy Fitzroy has a major part of the story, but I could also see her part is so limited. I feel like she's in the game so little that I think Cornelia Slate might even have like just as big a role as Daisy Fitzroy did. I might get into it in another video, but Daisy Fitzroy has a little bit bigger part in Burial at Sea, which is really interesting. I'll probably spoil that as well. I really enjoyed like their connection to Booker for both of them, where Daisy wants to like sign this deal with Booker to get these weapons, where Slate wants to kind of relive like what happened and try and tell Booker that Comstock is a fraud, all that kind of stuff. Next thing I've got here is the music. Music, man. Old ragtime versions of like songs in that barbershop quartet of the Beach Boys song God Only Knows. It's so fantastic. And you might like play in the God Only Knows part, like happens like very early on in the game. And if you get to that part and you're like, man, like why is there a Beach Boys song here? Like this is like 1918 or 1912 or whatever, 1908, whatever year it is in BioShock Infinite. I already forgot. Like why is this here? I mean, like it all makes sense. Like if you have a question at the beginning of this game that you're just like, why is this? Why is that there? More than likely it has an answer for you. Like it knows what it's doing. Like it knows it's playing you. It knows those sorts of things. I think that also leads to the game being really fantastic. But yeah, like it's like Fortunate Son. Like I think Everybody Wants to Rule the World has like old versions. I have like a playlist saved on YouTube of like people, like their songs that are just from BioShock Infinite, and even like the song that like After You've Gone or After You're Gone, which is the song that starts when you like originally go to like the title screen for the first time. Like just even that song, like I just leave that on. It's just fantastic. I say fantastic a lot, but man, it's so good. It's so good. Voxophones act as the audio diaries, and I feel like they're just as captivating as the original audio diaries. I think there's a lot more audio diaries in the original game than there are voxophones. I might be wrong on that. It just seemed like there was. Um, but just like, walking into a room and just seeing complete chaos and then picking up a voxophone and just like hearing about what happened to these people, it just never gets old. And I really just always wanted to just stay and look and just see the environment, listen to what everything had to say, focus on what they were saying before moving on. I didn't really want to engage in anything else when I was listening to those voxophones, just because like standing in the room where like this was recorded, it really is something special, just to kind of relive through all that stuff. Really kind of just fast forwarding. This is spoiler territory now. I'll even put with spoilers in the title of this video, but the revelation that you were Comstock and Elizabeth is your daughter, that twist comes at the right time, which is literally at the very end of the game. It is literally 10 seconds, 30 seconds away from the end of the game, which I think is the perfect time where you kind of playing through the original BioShock. You get that twist about halfway through the game, where this one, you get it like right at the end. Like you're kind of just waiting for that twist. You're waiting for that twist. Like, okay, we're not going to get it. It's just going to be this or that. And then it kind of just punches you in the face being like, here's the twist, and then see ya. It really resonated with me, whereas I don't think it resonated with my brother. Because my brother, I think back in like 2013, I'm pretty sure he like texted me being like, I'm pretty sure I'm Comstock. And I'm like, dang it. Like, he knows. Like, he figured it out. And he's done that with some other games before, too, where I'm just like, oh, man, it's going to be really great. He's going to, like, understand this. And then it's like, no, he saw right through it. He already knows what's going to happen. But, yeah, I mean, there's not, like, too many, like, big story beats. Like, you have the Chen Lin side story, which isn't, I mean, it's part of the main path. But those really don't amount to much. You could easily replace that with another side storyline and it would be fine. Kind of the same thing with Cornelius Slate. Like, those aren't those moments, like meeting those people, aren't as memorable for sure as meeting Sander Cohen, or several of the other people like Fort Frolic and Arcadia and whatever else, Atlas, all those people from the original. They're just, Steinman, just to throw out names, the Medical Pavilion, for the original. They're definitely not as memorable as somebody like Slade or Daisy Fitzroy, which is why I wish we got more of those characters. But yeah, I love BioShock Infinite. I think it's one of my favorites. I really think it throws what a conceivably BioShock 4 could be. It really just like throws it into a spin, because like then you're always talking about always a lighthouse, always a man, always a city. I mean, the end, BioShock Infinite to me ends like in, which the argument could be made for both ways, but I think it ends in a perfect way that I'm almost like, I don't even know how you could do another BioShock, like just to live up to like, there's always a man, there's always a lighthouse, there's all these different tears and doors and realities. Like, I don't even know how a sequel would even begin to attack that. And even if they didn't, like, if trying to think of can't remember the name off the top of my head, I'm so terrible. Cloud Chamber, I think that's it. Cloud Chamber Studios, which is like 2K announced as the studio working on a new BioShock game. Do they even try to attempt that kind of line of I guess design, where like, oh, there's all these different realities and all these different things? Like, are they going to be able to make that tie into what it is, or are they just going to pull like a BioShock 2 and just be like, this is just a city, this is just the story, and that's it? I think that would be pretty disappointing, but if that is, but I mean, Ken Levine and his team just put such a high bar out there for this game, just story-wise, storytelling, just how narrative, characters, all that. I mean, I love BioShock Infinite, but even on a gameplay standpoint, I'd probably say the best playing BioShock game is probably BioShock 2. I would say that's probably like the best gameplay-wise out of the three, which I think like that's a way, and by no means am I calling it easy, but I feel like that's like the way that majority of designers could improve upon BioShock and BioShock Infinite is in the gameplay department. But I mean, you can have great gameplay, but I mean, I'm playing BioShock. I want that story. I mean, you know, feel like every video I bring up Life is Strange. But I mean, like, that game doesn't like play all that great, and the game doesn't look all that great. But man, that story, it's so compelling to play. That's what I want. Like, I will trudge through kind of some mediocre gameplay if your story is like top notch. Like, if your game does so much right, I can basically like forgive. You know, it almost doesn't take me out of it. Like, if your game is so polished, it's not taking me out of the experience, because this narrative, this story, I believe what you're trying to tell me. I believe in it. And I think that's just such a high bar that Ken Levine set. But I do plan on doing a little short talk, maybe going deeper into more spoilers for the full game and BioShock Infinite Burial at Sea. Currently replaying part 1. I did play the DLC back in the day. It's only like 2014 when it came out. But I do plan on maybe doing like a little video on that, talking about how maybe BioShock Infinite isn't the end of the saga, where Burial at Sea is actually the true ending. So please be excited for that. I might have some other baseball card stuff coming as well. But thank you very much for watching or listening. Might have some Clash in the Clouds footage in the background of this. So thanks. Bye.